What is up, Rad Potential YouTube? It is exhaust time for the 4-rotor. So we've got a bunch, 3.5 stainless steel tubing here, one vibrant muffler, a vibrant resonator. Hopefully we can give this thing a nice deep tone, but not exactly ear-piercingly uncomfortable to drive. You still got to know that this is a 4-rotor, so we can't have this thing sounding like a stock RX-8 or basically a Prius because they're the same thing. So we've got to make this thing sound crispy. You can see what I've got laying out right here is what is currently not under the car. So one of the things that I like to do whenever I start to build exhausts, and I'm by no means an expert fabricator, but I built the whole exhaust for this, built the whole exhaust for a couple rotary trucks, a couple other cars, so I can stick pipes together. Under the car, I like to start out by putting all of my constraints in place. Ignore the jack stands that are holding the car up and the excessive amount of mud on this tire that's going to inevitably fall off in my face. You can see back there, 2 big jack stands holding the muffler, 2 jack stands holding the resonator, a jack stand holding the header up under the car. Once we have all the constraints in place, then I can come under here and start to see what I'm going to need to connect everything together. Fortunately, the FD has a subframe and not a straight axle, so I do not have things that I have to go up and over, more like just under it all and keep it from rattling and smashing into stuff. So starting at the very front, y'all can see right there, we got to connect this pipe to this pipe. They're very close in elevation, so just slightly up from here, and then I have this little kind of S I've got to make, very short, 6 to 8 inches apart. We're going to start with that. And I should be able to basically make all of it with 1 or 2 pieces from this 3.5 inch J-bend, which this thing is massive. All my little horsepower cars up till now, not as free-flowing exhausts up till now. The biggest has been 3 inch, which was the Radix 7 right here, turbo 1st gen RX-7. This is 3.5, and let me tell you, that's a big pipe. What I'm going to do now, and this is kind of where every fabricator has their own wicked ways of doing things, is I kind of like to just take a couple pieces of like clothes hanger wire, welding wire, fit the wire in there, something that's going to give me like the angle and then a straight and then the angle again. That's going to help me put eyes on what I need to cut out of this. If it wasn't like 3.5 inch ginormous pipe, and this stainless piece of pipe is actually pretty expensive, I would just start cutting pieces and seeing if they fit and making them fit. But when you're messing with like 2.5 inch or even 3 inch to some extent, 2.5 inch, or even just mild steel exhaust versus stainless, you know, the cost of making a mistake becomes much greater. So we want to try to measure twice, cut once. This thing is going to be very loud, but it should sound good. All stainless pipe, crispy, nice. I can see straight through a muffler, which you guys will see. Should just dampen the note, and then it might sound like 80% of a 787B on the street. How helpful can a piece of safety wire be for you making your exhaust? Well, if you have a hard time visualing angles, then this is going to help you out. So this is my very small piece that's floating around on the screen here for you guys. Effectively, what I've done is created a tangent intersection point with the safety wire to the best of my ability. So you're just creating a straight line to a sharp edge to another straight line, in my case 3 straight lines. That also kind of accounts for the vertical change as well, but this is my horizontal angle that I need to create, and you can see that it's pretty shallow. So what you're going to do is it's a tangent intersection. You have a tangent line here, a sharp point here, another tangent here. So what I'm looking for is where this second tangent, or we'll call it the tangent out, is going to be as perpendicular to the pipe as possible. And that's going to mean I'm going to cut it straight right here, perpendicular to the center line of the pipe. And what that's going to make sure is that I have a circle. If you cut an angled piece of pipe at another angle, i.e. not perpendicular to the axis of the pipe itself, you're going to end up with like more of a ovalized or a teardrop shape. A lot of those super trick like wastegate dumps and hood exits and stuff that have that teardrop, if you just imagine cutting this corner piece of pipe just like that, just cut it straight off, that's going to give you that pear shape outlet, and then they kind of make the end of it a point and stuff. But we don't want that. We want circles. We want optimal, nice, smooth, laminar flow through this deal. Laminar flow is the jam. The most satisfying part of putting all this together is putting the last piece in. Just got to use my 16th hand, which is the power of editing, and I'm going to slide the resonator back. Voila, didn't even have to snap my fingers, and it fits perfect. So these vibrant resonators are actually a 3.5 inch ID, and the vibrant tubing is a 3.5 inch OD. So that means the outer diameter of the pipe fits the inner diameter of the resonator. So you could use these as like a slip fit with a clamp or something if you're old school like me and you just work on old cars, but this fits perfectly inside here, so we can TIG weld around the edge of that and around the edge of that. Gotta have that stuff fit nice, otherwise your welder's gonna be mad at you. If your welder is also you will probably be mad at yourself. So this up here has this little kind of venturi thing to make this 2.5 to 3.5 collector work, and then we're gonna swoop up and over and hit the resonator. So now we get to tack this together and then move behind the resonator and connect to the muffler. For the next segment, as a giant piece of mud just fell on in and around my ear, gotta love that. I foreshadowed that would happen. Here is my next bend. So I have this piece of bar stock in here backwards now. Now we're the right way. So this is gonna be my next bend. This little kind of jive to clear the power plant frame there. Mud in my ear. I'm gonna take the bend that you see in this piece of scrap aluminum over to my J bend, find my double tangents. That's gonna get me really close. That's gonna get me really close, if not exact. That's the first bend done. I've actually got 2 bends in this. So it'll be a bend, probably a section of straight, whatever's left over on the leg, and then I will cut the other bend out of like the other section where I need a big line straight as well. So right here will be the first bend, and then we'll use this right here on the resonator side. It'll go straight, and then I'll probably come over here. Actually, I have a little bit of a bend left there, but I'll come over here and cut the second bend so I have a straight piece, and those two will probably like resonator side, straight, bend, and this section of straight will point at the muffler, and then we'll do whatever last bit of bend we need out of here, and then ideally there's enough of this left over that I can make a little turn down tip. But if I have to just order another 3.5 inch 90 or even a 3.5 inch super slick titanium blue covered whatever Johnny wants tip, we can put that on there as well. I'm gonna bet we're gonna have enough left over. We could just polish one of these up, look mint for a turn down. What do you think, Letty? Turn down dolphin tail Ari Mamma Mia tribute tip. Yeah? Big stretch in the middle of the video. It's getting cold for no reason in March. Would you just look at that exhaust? Check that out. So I still got the jack stand under it, even though I've got hangers on it. So I've got a hanger here just behind the resonator to hold the weight of the resonator. I think that's about where the stock catalytic converter was. I added a V-band right here by the diff, mainly so that it's still technically got a mid-pipe from where the slip fit collector is to then right here. The V-band then goes back to the big muffler, and I've got 2 hangers on the muffler as well, one on each side, just like a stock exhaust would have been. I'm super happy with the fitment of this thing, guys. It's all nice and tucked up under here. Fortunately, this car isn't that low, nor it's gonna like stay that low, but basically the lowest point of the exhaust is just the bottom of that resonator, so you really won't smash the collector up there on anything. You'll just kind of drag that up a little bit, which I think is pretty okay for an FD. Most of your FDs, if you're gonna drag them up, it's gonna be in the center or the front lip. This one here, you might drag it in the middle a little bit, but I don't think you will unless you just drive over a speed bump straight like a jabroni and don't kind of take it at an angle with your lowered car anyways. So Coming back to the tip, this is the tip, guys. So get in here and polish up the stainless, and it'll look just as nice as this muffler does. We really wanted something on this car that's pretty understated as far as like the exterior. We wanted to keep it as stock as possible, as looking stock as possible, but more like just tastefully modified. We didn't want it to be a full-blown four-rotor race car wide body, giant wheels and sticky tires and, you know, an obnoxiously loud exhaust. So it's probably going to be obnoxiously loud, but we just didn't want it to look like it is. So this is pretty tame, little 3.5-inch tip. Enough clearance to probably melt the bumper still. However, it's not going to be like turbo track car, deceleration fuel turned on, dumping flames out the back of it. It's just street car, cruise it around, not too worried about melting this. You can see we've already got a little bit of soot and some oxidation in the paint there anyways. But super stoked with how that has came out today. It just adds to the beautiful header we've got here from Defined Auto Works. Comes down under the car, nice and tucked up under there. The big runners to the 2.5-inch, to the 3.5-inch, to the resonator, to the pipes, to the V-band, to all the way out the back. A little bit more mud that fell in my ear, but that's okay. So right there, I still have that jack stand under it. I'm worried about the weight of the exhaust just being tacked together. So whenever I take it apart and take the back muffler off and then pull the slip fit and the resonator off, hopefully nothing that I've tacked together, usually just three little tacks all the way around the pipe, comes apart. If it does, you've got the tack marks to be able to line it back up perfectly. So let's go ahead and get this off the car and lay it out next to it so y'all can see what it looks like. I'm going to leave the headers on though. We're not pulling the headers off. That's a little too crazy. Tubes, metal and tubes.
Tubes.
I'm sorry, you say tubes?
Glass and tubes.
Woo! Alright y'all, there she is. Sitting backwards to the orientation of the car, but headers come in. 2-into-1 collector. Such a trick piece. Nicely TIG welded. I'm sure Kyle's TIG welds are going to look just as good as the Vibrant factory TIG welds. Coming back through the resonator. Got a hanger right there. Around the diff. V-band. Around the subframe. Into the muffler. With a little dolphin tip turned down. So, like I mentioned earlier, the dolphin tip. If you ever look up the R Yamamiya exhaust for these things, or even the R Yamamiya RX-8 exhausts, they've got this sick dolphin tip with the little badge on it. I don't think we're gonna get an R Yamamiya badge, but I could probably have like a little Rad Potential badge made. That would be a sweet little tribute to it to put on the tip. I think this thing's gonna be pretty loud though, just with, it's only got these two mufflers. So hopefully it sounds good. One thing that always drives me up the wall on rotary cars is if you put a long piece of pipe at the very end. So right here, if you have a piece of pipe that comes out to clear the bumper, or it's real long, or you just have a muffler up under the car and like straight piped it, rotaries get so rappy, rasty, just like rah, versus like a nice rah. Y'all understand the car noises, but you really want that nice deep tone, and that's what I like with the Radix 7, even my RX-8. They both have the mufflers right at the tip, so you just get it turned down right out of that. You get that nice throaty rotary noise. I went ahead and flipped the exhaust around so you guys can see it in the orientation it's going to go on the car. Little jibe to the right, little jibe to the left, little out the back. Even though you guys already just saw all of that and didn't quite see all of it get put together, but the gist of it. I kept using that little bar of aluminum just to kind of get my bins situated so I knew what I was looking at. It's very easy to get lost in all the open space under your car, and then your exhaust starts going places that are inefficient. So for me, I like to be able to visualize the bins, much like making brake lines or a new hard line for your clutch system or something like that. Use the wire, use something. That's what I do, so I can see it before I make it, before I cut up a bunch of real nice stainless. I loved seeing all of your comments on the previous video, guys. Mad help towards pushing this thing through to the finish line. One of the big things that you guys mentioned is that the Saki Bomb oil filter pedestal doesn't actually feed clean oil to those two ports that come off of it. I didn't actually know that. I figured where it's feeding in, it's going to go through the filter, and then it's going to go out to all of that stuff. So looking through parts, trying to figure stuff out. We're going to end up running a remote oil filter on this. Most likely for Deal's Gap, we might still have the Saki Bomb oil filter thing on there, but just be feeding oil to that through a remote mounted filter. I found that Franklin Performance down under sells a really trick FD oil filter block off, much like I have on the Radix 7 that bolts on here, but it has 2 ports on it. So it'll have a -10 feed port so we can feed oil to the engine, and then another -10 port. The second port will get routed across to the front iron, and then I think these two, the center bearings, I'm going to run a line from the remote oil filter out. It has 2 out ports, the one I'm looking at. So one of those out ports will come off, it will Y and go to 2 -6 lines, and that will feed my center bearing straight from that remote oil filter. The front iron will see oil coming from where the rear iron is. So basically the same, but what that's going to do is put a pretty good priority on getting good clean oil to those center bearings through the external oil lines versus just relying on the eccentric shaft. So thank you guys so much for those comments, because I'd have probably just hooked it up to that Saki Bomb thing not knowing any better. And that's one of the big reasons why I wanted to run all this stuff by you, because I wanted to learn from you guys or anybody who has experience with that. I guess when you feed a turbo from your oil filter sandwich plate, you're actually feeding your turbo dirty oil. So I'm happy that on my Radix 7, I'm feeding from the front iron. On my old 6-port Turbo FC, I was feeding oil to the turbo straight from the oil filter sandwich plate I had installed. So it definitely was getting dirty oil for a good while. So I appreciate the knowledge for sure. Anytime you guys see anything that I'm doing wrong or doing different, or you guys have a better, more efficient way, definitely drop it in the comments. There is no wrong answers here. I'm going to be unoffendable in the pursuit of improving the projects around here. So anything we can do to improve stuff, I'm all for it. But exhaust is done now. That is the last bit of major fabrication that I need to do. So this whole car is getting tore back apart, or at least everything in the engine bay is all going to start coming out, because the exhaust is done. It can go to TIG welder guy. Thermostat's done. It can go to TIG welder guy. Basically all the plumbing sorted out, so we don't need to order anything major for that. And we're ready to paint, and I'm ready to paint this engine bay. So we got to strip it all down. Everything's coming out. Got a little bit of touch-up work to do up here around the radiator stuff, where I've cut and modified that core support a little bit. We still have to modify the bumper support, but we can do that after paint. And then everything in here has to be removed. We've got to strip this engine bay down to metal. Calvin and I like to go to bare metal. There is no just scuff and shoot around here. Bare metal. So we're going to take this whole thing down to bare metal. I'm going to cut these brackets off here. I'm going to clearance that subframe. The subframe is getting painted silver. The engine bay is getting painted white to match the outside of the car. So get fired up. It's going to be a huge, crazy, busy week, because we're fixing to yank this 4-rotor out here probably in a couple days and get some real crazy progress done. In addition, here at the end of the video, we'll give you a little rally car recap before you see the actual rally video that's going to come out once I can acquire some outside footage of the rally car from on stage, because we actually made it more than 3 stages this time, albeit we thought we weren't. So it was an amazing adventure at 100 Acre Wood. You guys will have to tune into that video to find out all the dirty details, but just know this: I broke the car pretty good on day 1, and we came back on day 2 and kept up with a 1976 Ford Escort. And let me tell you, it got a little sketchy in the dust because we were getting close. So with that, thank you guys so much for watching. The rotary content, the rally content, all the rad content. Drop any questions in the comments below as usual. Go check out the Rad Potential Patreon if you want to support the channel, or if you have questions about your particular build, need help with something, that's the easiest way to get a hold of me over there. And I'm excited to finally get to paint the 4-rotor engine bay, make some serious progress. So with that, thank you guys so much for watching. Keep it rad. We'll see you in the next one. Well, I had initially told Johnny when I was going to build this exhaust, I was going to try to fit as many mufflers under here as possible. But once you start looking at 3.5-inch mufflers, 3.5 inches, that's a lot of pipe under there. It's very big. Sometimes 3.5 is all you can fit. Peace, guys.